From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
You know, the things that they do to maximize the profit, which really boils down to dumping the sick.
Private insurers dumping the sick. Thousands of patients and healthcare reform activists are staging protests outside the offices of the nation's major health insurance companies. We'll speak with a mother who protested outside the corporate headquarters of Cigna. The insurance giant denied coverage to her twin daughters. They were diagnosed with a rare cancer at the age of 4, even though they'd been covered by the family's former insurer. Then, as President Obama heads to Copenhagen to vie for the Olympics to come to Chicago in 2016, we go to South Africa, where in preparation for the 2010 World Cup, thousands are being displaced. We'll speak with a young member of the shack dwellers movement who's fighting back.
The only thing that is being remembered is to build stadiums for the 2010 World Cup. They don't talk about the poor people anymore. They're only talking about promoting the country. So the poor people decided to join hands together and approach the government and say, hey, we are still existing in the country.
We will speak with 18-year-old Mazwi Zimanda. He is now in hiding in Durban. We'll reach him by phone. But first, for the first time ever, the Supreme Court will consider the constitutionality of part of the Patriot Act. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Talks begin in Geneva today between Iran, the U.S., and 5 other nations. The meeting could lead to a side channel of bilateral talks between U.S. and Iranian officials. That would in turn mark the most substantial negotiations between the two sides since the Iranian Revolution 30 years ago. Iran's seeking to discuss a wide range of issues, including reforming the United Nations Security Council, while the Obama administration wants to focus on Iran's nuclear activities. The talks come as the Iranian foreign minister visited Washington, D.C., the highest-ranking visit by an Iranian official since 1979. The State Department says the minister made a private visit to the Iranian interest sections and held no talks with U.S. officials. On Wednesday, White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said Iran faces stronger punitive measures if it fails to properly disclose its nuclear program.
I think you've heard the president and other leaders around the world say this is not talk for talk's sake. There's a specific agenda and specific problems that need to be dealt with, and if they're not dealt with responsibly by the Iranians, that stronger measures will be developed and implemented to ensure that they do.
As the U.S. pressures Iran, the news agency Interpress Service reports the U.S. is going ahead with the Bush administration program increasing nuclear weapons production. The complex modernization initiative would expand 2 existing nuclear sites to produce new bomb parts. The administration is proposing to build new plutonium pits at the Los Alamos lab in New Mexico and expand enriched uranium processing at the Y-12 facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. In Honduras, international pressure appears to be forcing a slight shift in the business elite that helped install the coup regime in June. Honduran business leaders reportedly told international diplomats this week that they'd be open to a plan for the return of the ousted president, Manuel Zelaya. But in addition to limiting Zelaya's authority under the Costa Rica-brokered Arias Accords, business leaders are also insisting Zelaya face trial on corruption charges and be forced to leave office when his term expires in January, despite spending most of the past 3 months in exile. The plan was discussed at a meeting at the residence of the U.S. ambassador to Honduras, Hugo Lorenz, last Sunday. A Zelaya advisor says the elite's proposals are born dead because they presuppose his guilt. Zelaya remains inside the Brazilian embassy, where he's taken refuge since returning to Honduras last week. Meanwhile, the coup regime continues its crackdown on protesters, despite backing off a decree authorizing new draconian powers. On Wednesday, government forces arrested dozens of people at a building occupied by Zelaya supporters. This is protest leader Rafael Alegria.
The National Congress has not ratified the decree. It is absolutely illegal. They have applied the decree because they are desperate. It is the iron fist of Micheletti, a fascist dictator attitude.
Meanwhile, a radio station shut down by government forces has resumed broadcasting on the Internet. Radio Globo director David Romero said the coup regime is trying to silence opposition.
por callar al pueblo.
By silencing the people, they want to break up the resistance. They know that Radio Globo and Channel 36 are the communication links. By eliminating us, according to them, they silence the resistance.
Democracy Now! Broadcasts on Radio Globo in Honduras. In Indonesia, around 530 people have been killed in an earthquake in the western city of Padang. The death toll is expected to rise, with thousands believed trapped below scores of collapsed or damaged buildings. The Obama administration's unveiled a proposal that would force the nation's largest polluters to install technology limiting emissions of greenhouse gases. The rule would apply to any new or expanded industrial plant emitting at least 25,000 tons of pollution. The EPA says these plants currently account for 70% of U.S. emissions. The proposal comes as Senate Democrats introduce their version of a climate bill imposing federal limits on greenhouse gases. The measure would cut emissions 20% from 2005 levels over the next decade. It would also allow polluters to swap emissions credits under a program identical to cap-and-trade. Appearing with co-sponsor Senator Barbara Boxer, Senate Foreign Relations Chair John Kerry said addressing global warming is essential to U.S. security.
Washington is used to letting big oil and special interests stand between us and the goals of everyday citizens. And after the last few months, we know what's coming. People will say we can't afford to act. But you know the truth. You know it, all of you. And we know the truth, those of us standing here, and those who served in the military know the truth, which is why they're here today. The truth is our security and our economy will both be strengthened, and we can't afford not to act.
In other environmental news, the EPA has unveiled plans to regulate tens of thousands of chemicals found in everyday items, such as toys, cell phones, and food containers. The proposed rules would force companies to submit toxicity data for existing or new chemicals. A greater number of toxins would be evaluated for health and safety risks. The move's being described as the most substantial overhaul of chemical regulation since the Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976. In New York, state officials have opened the door to natural gas drilling inside the Watershed, supplying drinking water to some 15 million people, including 9 million New Yorkers. On Wednesday, regulators unveiled new guidelines allowing companies to drill for gas in the Marcellus Shale, but under strict conditions. Environmental advocates and citizens groups had called for a full drilling ban over concerns that drilling will contaminate water supplies. The New York rules are billed as the toughest in the country, but critics say that doesn't go far enough. Kate Sinding of the Natural Resources Defense Council said, quote, "It's not appropriate to allow drilling in such a unique and extraordinarily valuable resource. The record in other states is so abysmal, and it doesn't take much to do better than them," she said. Federal FBI Director Robert Mueller has revealed there was no imminent threat in the case of an Afghan immigrant accused of plotting a bombing attack on U.S. soil. 24-year-old Najibullah Zazi is being held on charges of acquiring and preparing explosive materials. On Wednesday, Senator Joe Lieberman questioned Mueller about the alleged plot at a Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing.
There has been some discussion in the media as to whether there remains an imminent threat related to the Zazi plot.
We do not believe there is an imminent threat.
Mueller went on to urge lawmakers to approve the renewal of 3 Patriot Act spying provisions due to expire at the end of the year. The measures allow the government to collect a wide range of financial and personal records, as well as monitor suspects with roving wiretaps.
Those provisions have been very essential to us, particularly the first 2, which relate to the business records provision, right. And secondly, the roving wiretaps. And the third, while it has not been used on Lone Wolf, it will be and is important if we get the similar situation that we had with Moussaoui in 2001. So I would urge the reenactment of those provisions.
As Mueller advocated the extension of Patriot Act spying powers, the American Civil Liberties Union accused the FBI of misusing those powers to help stifle debate over their renewal. The ACLU says the FBI has used a Patriot Act provision allowing it to issue gag orders on its use of national security letters, or NSLs. The FBI can gather personal information from libraries, internet service providers, and others, while barring those institutions from revealing their